On my birthday, my rich grandson smiled at me. "Grandma, how do you spend your $3.4 million trust fund?" I blinked, completely shocked. "What trust fund?" My daughter-in-law looked like she might throw up. Connor turned to her and asked, "Where did it go?" If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. But now, let me tell you how I went from birthday cake to discovering a financial mess in less than 5 minutes. I'm Dorothy Hartwell, 73 years old. Until last Tuesday, I thought my biggest problem was deciding whether to splurge on cable TV. Turns out, I should have been worried about where my millions went instead, but let me back up. It all started at what was supposed to be a quiet family dinner for my birthday, at my son Michael's house in Westchester. Nothing fancy, just me, Michael, his wife Patricia, and their 18-year-old son Connor. The kind of family gathering where I usually got a grocery store cake. And everyone checked their phones more than they looked at me. Connor had just returned from his first semester at Princeton. All confidence and expensive clothes I knew Michael couldn't afford on his teaching salary. The boy had always been sharp, but college seemed to have given him a new awareness of money. Maybe too much awareness. We were sitting around their dining room table, the one Patricia insisted they buy on credit. 3 years ago, because presentation matters. I was cutting my slice of supermarket cake when Connor, bless his heart, decided to start a conversation. "So, Grandma," he said, leaning back in his chair with that casual confidence only teenagers have, "I've been taking this economics course and we're learning about wealth management. I was curious, how do you spend your $3.4 million trust fund? Do you have a financial advisor, or do you just keep it in savings?" My fork froze halfway to my mouth. I blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" Patricia, who had been reaching for the coffee pot, froze completely. The color drained from her face so fast I thought she might faint into the birthday cake. "Your trust fund," Connor repeated, looking genuinely confused by my confusion. "The one Dad set up for you after Grandpa died. The one that pays for your apartment and everything." I set down my fork very carefully. In my 73 years, I've learned that life has a way of dropping bombshells when you least expect them. But this was something else entirely. "Connor, honey," I said, keeping my voice steady, "I don't have a trust fund. I live on Social Security and the small pension from the hospital where I worked for 30 years. That's it." Michael went very quiet, staring at his plate like it contained the secrets of the universe. Patricia looked like she was seriously considering whether jumping out the window might be preferable to whatever was about to happen. Connor's eyebrows shot up. "But Dad, you told me last year, when I was applying for financial aid, that Grandma was well taken care of. You said there was a trust fund that covered all her expenses, which is why I could put down that we don't provide any financial support for grandparents on the FAFSA forms." "Oh, now this is getting interesting," Patricia said sharply. "Maybe we should discuss this later." "No," I said, my voice carrying the authority I'd used as head nurse for 15 years. "I think we should discuss this right now. Connor, tell me exactly what your father told you about this supposed trust fund." The poor boy looked between his parents, clearly sensing the tension but not understanding its source. He said, "Grandpa left you really well provided for when he died. That there was a trust fund worth over $3 million that pays for your apartment, your medical expenses, everything. He said you were independent and didn't need any help from us." $3 million. I almost laughed at the absurdity. My husband Frank had been a good man and a decent electrician, but he died 12 years ago with about $80,000 in savings and a paid-off house that we'd sold to cover his medical bills. The idea that he'd hidden millions from me was ridiculous, but the look on Patricia's face wasn't ridiculous. It was pure, undiluted panic. "Patricia," I said quietly, "you look like you've seen a ghost. Something you want to share with the class?" She started stammering something about misunderstandings and confusion, but Connor cut her off. "Wait," he said, his economics training clearly kicking in. "If Grandma doesn't know about the trust fund and she's not getting money from it, then where's the money going?" Smart boy, takes after his grandmother, not his father. Michael finally looked up from his plate. "Mom, I think there's been some confusion. The only confusion here," I said, standing up from the table, "is how my son convinced his child that his grandmother has millions of dollars she doesn't know about." "Connor, sweetheart, would you mind showing me exactly what your father told you about this trust fund?" That's when Patricia started crying. Not the pretty kind of tears you see in movies, but the ugly, gasping kind that happen when someone's world is about to collapse. And right then, I realized my quiet little birthday dinner had turned into something much more interesting. Patricia's tears weren't graceful. They were desperate, hiccuping sobs. The sound of someone's carefully built lie crumbling faster than stale cookies. "Patricia," I said, sitting back down with the calm patience I'd learned from decades of handling difficult patients. Why don't you tell me what's really going on? She wiped her nose with her napkin, which struck me as funny, considering she's the one who always insisted on cloth napkins because they were more refined. Nothing refined about snot. Honey, it's not what you think, she began, which, in my experience, always means it's exactly what you think. Only worse. Connor looked between his parents like he was watching a tennis match. Will someone please explain what's happening? Does Grandma have a trust fund or not? No, I said firmly. I absolutely do not have a trust fund. But apparently someone's been telling people I do. Michael, you want to jump in here anytime? My son had the good grace to look ashamed, but of course he stayed silent. 45 years old and still letting his wife do the talking whenever things got uncomfortable. Some things never change. Patricia took a shaky breath. When Connor was applying for colleges 2 years ago, the financial aid forms were so complicated. They wanted to know about all family assets, including grandparents' wealth. Michael thought, you thought you'd commit fraud on federal financial aid forms by claiming I had money. I don't have. I kept my tone conversational, but inside, I was furious. That's a felony, Patricia. You could go to prison for that. We never took any money. She protested. We just adjusted the numbers so Connor could get better aid packages. I turned to Connor, who had gone pale. Honey, did you receive need-based financial aid this year? He nodded silently, based on forms that said your grandmother has over $3 million? Another nod. Well, this was just getting better and better. Not only had they committed financial aid fraud, they'd done it using my name and non-existent assets. But here's what I don't understand. I continued, slipping into the sharp tone I used to use with incompetent residents. Connor specifically asked how I spend my trust fund money. That's not something you'd ask because of a financial aid form. That means this topic has come up before, probably multiple times. Patricia's crying grew louder. Michael finally spoke. Mom, we can explain everything. Oh, I hope so, I said, because right now, I'm thinking about calling the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. They're very interested in education fraud these days. You wouldn't, Patricia gasped. Try me. I said, I'm 73. Patricia, at my age, revenge is basically a hobby. Connor suddenly sat up straighter. Wait, Dad. Remember last Christmas when you said we couldn't visit Grandma more because she preferred her privacy and independence? And when Aunt Sarah asked why Grandma was living in that small apartment instead of a nice senior community, you said she chose to live modestly despite having plenty of money? The pieces were finally clicking together for the boy. I was proud of him and deeply disappointed in his parents. You've been telling the whole family I'm secretly wealthy, I said. It wasn't even a question. It wasn't supposed to hurt anyone, Michael said weakly. We just wanted people to stop worrying about you. Stop asking us to help more. Help more? I laughed, and it wasn't a nice sound. Michael, when's the last time you helped me with anything? When did you last visit, call? Hell, when did you last remember my birthday without Patricia reminding you? His silence said it all. So, let me get this straight, I continued, my voice rising as the truth started to settle in. You told your son, your relatives, probably your friends and neighbors, that I'm sitting on millions of dollars. You used this fictional fortune to commit financial aid fraud. And you did all of this so people would stop expecting you to act like a decent son. To your elderly mother, Mom, please, I'm not finished. I turned to Connor. When you filled out those college applications, who did you think was paying for your education? The financial aid, well. He hesitated, his voice small. I thought you were helping. Dad always made it sound like you wanted to contribute, but preferred to do it quietly through the trust fund. My heart cracked a little for the boy. He genuinely believed his grandmother was supporting his education. Meanwhile, I was clipping grocery coupons and buying generic medication just to make my social security check stretch through the month. Patricia, I said, stop crying and answer me one simple question. If people think I have millions and Connor thinks I'm paying for college, where exactly do they think this money is coming from? She looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. We created some basic documentation, just for Connor's peace of mind. Simple bank statements showing the trust fund activity. You created fake bank documents in my name? Not official ones, Michael jumped in quickly. Just informal records. Nothing that would fool a real bank. Oh, just fake bank documents, I said dryly. Well, that makes identity theft so much better. Connor was staring at his parents like he'd never really seen them before. You've been lying to me. About everything. About Grandma, about college funding, about who we are as a family, smart boy. He was finally seeing his parents clearly, and it wasn't a pretty picture. I stood up again. This time with purpose. Here's what's going to happen. Connor, you're going to call your financial aid office tomorrow and tell them there was an error on your forms. You'll explain that your grandmother doesn't have a trust fund, never had one, and your family needs to refile everything honestly. But, Mom, Michael started, I'm not your mother right now, Michael. Right now, I'm a victim of identity theft and fraud. And you're the perpetrator, Connor, I continued, turning to my grandson. After you call the school, you're going to come stay with me for a few days. We need to have some honest conversations about family, money, and integrity. Patricia finally found her voice. You can't take our son. I'm not taking anything, I said calmly. I'm offering a college student a place to stay while his parents figure out how to dig themselves out of the hole they've created. Connor, you're an adult. It's your choice. The boy looked between his parents, then at me. I'll pack a bag, he said quietly. As Connor headed upstairs, I turned back to Michael and Patricia. Oh, and one more thing, I added. Tomorrow, you're going to call every single person you told about my imaginary fortune and explain that you lied. Your siblings, your neighbors, your friends, everyone. We can't, Patricia whispered. It would ruin us. I smiled, and for the first time in years, it felt genuinely happy. Honey, you ruined yourselves. I'm just making sure everyone knows about it. Connor packed light. Just a duffel bag with some clothes and his laptop. Smart kid, traveling like he wasn't sure he'd be coming back anytime soon. Can't say I blamed him. My apartment's nothing fancy, one bedroom, tiny kitchen. A living room barely big enough for my second-hand couch and the TV I bought on sale 3 years ago. But it's clean and it's honest. And after tonight, those two things felt more precious than gold. I'm sorry, Grandma, Connor said softly as I made up the couch for him. I should have known something was wrong. The numbers never really made sense. What do you mean? I asked. He sat down heavily, suddenly looking much older than 18. Well, if you really had over $3 million, he said, even earning conservative interest, you'd be making at least $100,000 a year in income, but you live here. In this apartment, Connor said, looking around. You shop with coupons. You wear the same coat you've had for 5 years. I paused, hands frozen mid-sheet tuck. You noticed all that? I'm not blind, Grandma, he said gently. I love my parents, but I'm not stupid. Rich people don't live like you do. But I thought maybe you were just really frugal, or maybe you gave most of it to charity. Or something. This boy, he was going to go far in life if he kept thinking critically like that. Connor, I asked. Can I ask you something? When your parents told you about this trust fund, did they ever say how it was set up? Who manages it? He pulled out his laptop. Actually, yeah. Dad gave me some documents when I was doing the financial aid paperwork 2 years ago. Said I might need them for verification. He opened a folder on his desktop labeled financial aid docs and turned the screen toward me. What? I saw made my blood pressure spike. Basic looking bank statements from something called First National Trust Services, showing an account in my name with a balance of $3,274,532. There were monthly statements going back 2 years, all showing regular withdrawals for living expenses and educational support. Connor. Honey, I said slowly, these are fake documents. He blinked. How can you tell? I pointed to the screen. First, I bank at Westchester Community Bank and have for 20 years. Second, look at this routing number. It's not even a real bank code. And third, see these withdrawal descriptions? Educational support, Princeton University? If I were paying your tuition, sweetheart, Princeton would have my name on file as a source of payment. Have you ever seen any paperwork that says money came from Dorothy Hartwell? He scrolled through the files, looking more uncomfortable by the second. No. Actually, all my financial aid documents just show federal aid and a few scholarships. Nothing from family because your parents never paid a dime of your tuition, I said quietly. The government did, based on fraudulent need calculations. Connor closed the laptop and rubbed his face with both hands. This is bad, isn't it? Like, criminal bad, very bad, I admitted. But here's the thing, sweetheart, you're a victim, too. You didn't know you were filing false documents. Your parents manipulated you into committing fraud by lying about our family's financial situation. He shook his head. But I should have questioned it more. I should have asked to see real statements or talk to you directly, smart and responsible. The boy definitely didn't get those traits from his father, Connor, I said. Can I see those documents again? I want to look at something. He reopened the laptop and I leaned closer, putting on the reading glasses that hung from the chain around my neck. I studied the fake statements more carefully this time, and something started nagging at me. Look at this, I said, pointing to one line item. August 15th, withdrawal for medical expenses, Mount Sinai Hospital. Connor, I haven't been to Mount Sinai in 10 years. But your mother had her gallbladder surgery there last August. He leaned closer. What are you saying? I'm saying these fake statements aren't just showing random expenses. They're showing real expenses, your family's real expenses. Someone took the time to create a false narrative where I was secretly paying for things. Your parents actually paid for themselves. Connor scrolled through more statements, his eyes widening. Oh God, look at this one. Home maintenance, $8,500. That's exactly what our roof repair cost last spring. And this one, vehicle maintenance, $2,300. That was Dad's transmission repair. Your parents haven't just been lying about me having money, Connor, I said slowly. They've been building a detailed fantasy, where I've been financially supporting your family for years. But why? He asked, shaking his head. Why go to all that trouble? I had a suspicion, but I needed more information, Connor, besides you, I asked carefully. Who else has seen these documents? Well, the financial aid office has copies, he said, and Dad showed them to Uncle Robert at Thanksgiving, when Uncle Robert was complaining about having to help Aunt Margaret with her mortgage. Uncle Robert, Michael's older brother, the successful one with the accounting firm and the big house in Connecticut, the one who'd always made Michael feel small. What exactly did your father tell Uncle Robert? I asked. That you were helping our family financially, Connor said. But you preferred to keep it private. Uncle Robert was saying something about how family members should help each other more. And Dad pulled out his phone and showed him one of these statements. Said you'd been quietly taking care of us for years. The picture was becoming clearer and it wasn't pretty. Michael hadn't just committed fraud to get financial aid. He'd used fake documents to boost his image within the family, to make himself look like the devoted son with a generous mother, instead of the struggling teacher who could barely provide for his family, Connor. I said carefully. I need to ask you something and I want you to really think before you answer. Has anyone else in the family ever asked you about my supposed wealth? Cousins, aunts, uncles? He was quiet for a long moment. Actually, yeah. Cousin Jessica asked me at Christmas if it was true that you were loaded. She said her mom heard from Uncle Robert that you'd been paying for my college and helping with our house payments, and what did you tell her? I asked. I said yeah, that you were amazing and generous, but didn't want recognition for it. I told her you preferred to help family quietly. My heart sank. The lie had spread through the entire family. By now, every relative probably believed I was sitting on millions while my own elderly siblings were struggling to pay their bills. Grandma, Connor said quietly. There's something else, something I probably should have mentioned earlier. I braced myself. What is it? Yesterday, before the birthday dinner, Dad got a phone call that really upset him. I heard him talking to someone about expectations and timelines and keeping up appearances. He kept saying things like, she doesn't know yet, and we need more time. My pulse quickened. Did you hear who he was talking to? No, Connor said. But right before he hung up, he said something about meeting on Tuesday to discuss the situation. Then he saw me listening and went outside to finish the call. Tuesday. That was tomorrow. I had a feeling that whatever meeting Michael had planned, it was going to be very enlightening. And I fully intended to find out what situation required my son to keep lying about my finances. But first, I had some phone calls to make, starting with my nephew, Robert. The same Robert who apparently believed his poor Aunt Dorothy had been secretly funding his brother's lifestyle. This was going to be an interesting conversation. At 8:30 the next morning, I called my nephew Robert's office. As a successful CPA, he was always at his desk early, probably billing some poor client $300 an hour to explain why they couldn't afford nice things. Robert Hartwell, CPA Services. A brisk voice answered. This is Robert. Hello, Robert. It's your Aunt Dorothy. There was a long pause. Then, in the overly polite tone people reserve for beloved but slightly eccentric relatives, he said, Aunt Dorothy, what a pleasant surprise. How are you? Managing everything? Managing everything? I repeated. Such an interesting choice of words. Oh, I'm managing just fine, Robert. In fact, I'm calling because I understand you've been discussing my financial arrangements with Michael. Another pause, longer this time. Well, yes, he said finally. We may have touched on that subject. Family looking out for family, you know. Indeed, I said evenly. Robert, I'd like you to explain to me exactly what Michael told you about my financial situation. Aunt Dorothy, surely you don't want to discuss such private matters over the phone. Oh, I absolutely do want to discuss them right now, I said. Unless, of course, you'd prefer I drive to your office and have this conversation in person. That did the trick. Robert had always been terrified of family drama spilling into his professional life. Well, he said cautiously, Michael mentioned that you've been able to help with some of their expenses. He even showed me documentation of a trust fund your late husband apparently established. Very thoughtfully planned, I must say. I nearly laughed. Robert, my husband Frank died 12 years ago with $80,000 to his name. He never had enough to establish a trust fund for anyone. Silence. But Michael showed me bank statements, Robert said weakly. Michael showed you forgeries. I replied. There is no trust fund, Robert. There never was. I live on Social Security and a small pension. That's it, that's impossible, he said. The documents looked completely legitimate. And Michael specifically said you'd been covering Connor's college expenses and helping with their mortgage payments. Now we were getting somewhere. What exactly did he say about helping with their mortgage? I asked. He said you'd been making monthly contributions to help them afford the house. Robert admitted that you preferred to handle it directly with them instead of going through banks or formal arrangements. Very generous of you. Though I did wonder why you weren't living more comfortably yourself if you had such substantial resources. Smart man. Too bad he'd ignored his instincts, Robert. I have never given Michael a penny toward his mortgage. I've never paid a cent of Connor's college expenses. And if you'd taken 5 minutes to actually think about it instead of believing convenient lies, you'd realize that a woman living in a one-bedroom apartment and shopping with grocery store coupons probably isn't secretly a millionaire. The phone went very quiet when Robert finally spoke again. His voice had that tight, professional edge people use when they're trying to stay calm. Aunt Dorothy, if what you're saying is true, then Michael has committed serious fraud. Not just within the family, but potentially with federal financial aid programs. Now you're catching up, I said dryly. But here's what I really want to know. Robert, have you shared this information about my supposed wealth with anyone else in the family? He hesitated. I may have mentioned it to Margaret when she was complaining about her financial struggles. And I think I said something to my mother about how nice it was that you were able to help Michael's family. His mother, my sister-in-law Helen, was Frank's sister. She lived in a senior community down in Florida on a fixed income and worried constantly about money. You told Helen that I have millions of dollars? I asked. I may have suggested, he said weakly, that you were financially comfortable and able to help family members. Robert, I said sharply. Helen called me 2 weeks ago asking if I could loan her $300 for a dental procedure. $300. She was embarrassed to even ask, apologized for bothering me, and promised to pay it back in installments. If you told her I was wealthy, why would she hesitate to ask for help with a $300 dental bill? The silence stretched so long I thought he might have hung up. Oh, God, he finally said. She did ask me about that. She said she was thinking of calling you for help but wasn't sure it was appropriate. I told her that family helps family, but that she should be careful not to take advantage of your generosity. You essentially told her not to ask me for help because you thought I might get annoyed about the money. I was trying to protect your privacy, he said quickly. You were protecting Michael's lie, I shot back. And in the process, you let an 80-year-old woman struggle with dental problems because you thought her wealthy sister-in-law might be bothered by a small loan request. I could hear Robert's breathing grow heavier. Aunt Dorothy, I had no idea. The documents looked legitimate and Michael was so specific about the arrangements. Who else did you tell? I asked. Margaret, he said immediately. Definitely Margaret. Probably my kids at some point. Maybe Jana at the family barbecue last summer. Jana, Frank's youngest sister. The one with 3 kids and a husband who'd been laid off twice in the last 5 years. If Jana thought I was sitting on millions while she was struggling to keep her family afloat. Robert, I said firmly, here's what you're going to do. You're going to call every single person you told about my supposed wealth and explain that you were misinformed. You're going to apologize for spreading false information about my financial situation. He hesitated again. But if I do that, people will ask questions about Michael. Yes, they will, I said evenly. And Michael will have to answer them. Aunt Dorothy, please, he said desperately. This could destroy his reputation, his career. He's a teacher, for God's sake. If this gets out, then maybe, I interrupted. He should have thought about that before committing fraud and dragging the entire family into his lies. I hung up without another word and immediately dialed Helen in Florida. Dorothy, she said, her voice warm and genuinely affectionate. How lovely to hear from you. How are you feeling, dear? I'm fine, Helen, I said. But I need to ask you something. A few weeks ago, you called about a dental procedure. You seemed hesitant to ask for help. Why? Oh, that, she said, sounding embarrassed. Robert mentioned something about you being very generous with family, but also very private about it. I didn't want to presume or make you uncomfortable, Helen, I said gently. If I had millions of dollars, don't you think I'd have offered to help you with dental work without you having to ask? Well, yes, she admitted. But Robert said, well, he said that rich people are often funny about money, that they don't like feeling taken advantage of. Helen, I said softly, I'm not rich. I never have been. Robert was misinformed about my financial situation, I said. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then, softly, Helen asked, Dorothy, are you saying you can't help with the dental work? Because if that's the case, please don't worry about it. I'll figure something out. My heart broke. Helen, of course I'll help with the dental work. I may not have millions, but I can certainly manage $300. I'll send you a check today. Are you sure? She asked gently. I don't want to impose. You're not imposing, I said firmly. You're family, and family helps family. Real help, not imaginary help. After I hung up with Helen, I sat in my small living room, staring at the quiet space around me and thought about the web of lies Michael had created. He hadn't just committed fraud, he'd poisoned family relationships, made elderly relatives feel ashamed to ask for help, and built a false narrative that had rippled through everyone connected to us. Connor came out of the bathroom, dressed for the day. I called Princeton's financial aid office, he said. I've got an appointment tomorrow to discuss correcting my aid application. Good for you, I said. Proud of him. That's exactly the right thing to do, Grandma. He hesitated. There's something else. I've been thinking about that phone call Dad got yesterday, the one about a meeting. What about it? He's supposed to meet someone today at 2 p.m. I heard him tell Mom this morning that he couldn't cancel it, that too much was riding on it. Did he say where? Some restaurant downtown. Choron, I think. I knew that name. Chez Laurent, the fancy French place where people went to impress clients or close big deals. Not the kind of spot where a high school teacher met a friend for lunch. Connor, I said slowly. How would you feel about taking your grandmother out for a late lunch today? He grinned. I think that sounds like an excellent idea. Chez Laurent at 1:45 p.m. was exactly what I expected. White tablecloths, pretentious waiters, and prices that would make a sensible person eat at home. Connor and I asked for a table near the back where we could see the entire restaurant. Without drawing attention, are you sure about this, Grandma? He asked, scanning the menu with the horrified look of someone realizing the soup cost $18. Absolutely, I said with a small smile. Sometimes you have to pay premium prices for premium information right at 2 p.m. Michael walked in. He was wearing his best suit, the one he'd bought for parent-teacher conferences, and he looked nervous enough to power a small city. He spoke quietly to the hostess, who led him to a corner table. 5 minutes later, I understood why Connor had thought his father was getting into something serious. The man who joined Michael was none other than Richard Waverly, one of Westchester County's most prominent attorneys. I recognized him from the newspaper, the kind of lawyer who defended the wealthy when they got caught doing things that would send regular folks straight to prison. Connor, I whispered. Do you recognize the man your father's meeting with? He squinted across the room. No, but Dad's definitely nervous. Look how he's fidgeting with his napkin. I couldn't hear their words, but I didn't need to. Body language said it all. Michael was doing most of the talking, gesturing nervously, while Waverly sat there with the calm patience of someone being paid very well for his time. Every so often, Waverly would lean forward, say something quietly, and Michael's shoulders would tense even more. Then Waverly pulled a thick manila envelope from his briefcase and slid it across the table's corner. I murmured, I need you to take a picture of that envelope when they're not looking. He blinked. Grandma, that feels like spying, honey, I said dryly. When your father is having secret meetings with expensive lawyers after committing fraud, it's not spying. It's self-preservation. Connor discreetly raised his phone and snapped a few photos as Michael opened the envelope. Inside were what looked like legal documents, and whatever was written there made my son's face go pale. Their conversation went on for another 20 minutes. Then something interesting happened. Waverly pulled out his own phone, made a quick call, spoke briefly, nodded, and hung up. Whatever he'd heard seemed to satisfy him. He stood, shook Michael's hand, and left. Michael stayed behind, sitting alone for almost 10 more minutes, staring down at those papers like they were his death warrant. Finally, he gathered them up, slid them back into the envelope, and walked out, leaving his expensive lunch untouched. Well, I said to Connor as we watched Michael rush past our table without noticing us, that was enlightening. Connor frowned. What do you think those documents were? I'm not sure, I said, but I intend to find out. Connor, how good are you with that computer of yours? He grinned a little. Pretty good. Why? Because Richard Waverly is not just any lawyer. He's the kind who handles white-collar criminal cases and helps wealthy families avoid scandals. If your father is meeting with him, this situation is much worse than just fraud on college applications. We paid the absurd bill and drove back to my apartment. The moment we got inside, Connor opened his laptop and pulled up the photos he'd taken at the restaurant. The envelope has a law firm logo, he said, zooming in. Waverly, Morrison and Associates. And look, there's a return address label. It's from something called Hartford Estate Management Services. Connor, look that up. See what they do. His fingers flew over the keyboard. Here we go, he said after a few seconds. They manage trusts and estates for wealthy families. Says here they specialize in discreet wealth management. For high net worth individuals, trust services, estate planning, asset protection. He stopped, eyes narrowing. Basically, all the things you'd need if you wanted to create convincing fake paperwork about a non-existent trust fund. I exhaled slowly. Connor, I think your father might have worked with them to create more elaborate fake documents about my supposed trust fund. But if that's true, why would he need Waverly? Maybe because he got caught, Connor said. Or maybe the fake documents were used for something bigger than just college aid. He scrolled through the Hartford website again. Grandma, look at this section, family wealth preservation and asset protection strategies. What if Dad wasn't just lying about your money? What if he was using those fake trust documents for something else? Like what? I asked. Like borrowing money, Connor said slowly. Think about it, if people believe you have millions in a trust fund, and Dad has documents that look official, he could use those as collateral for loans. My stomach dropped. Connor, that would be massive fraud. Not just lying on aid forms, potentially millions of dollars in fake loans. That would explain why he needs someone like Waverly. I grabbed my phone and called Robert. Aunt Dorothy, he answered. I was just about to call you back about those family notifications. Or Robert, I interrupted. I need you to think carefully. When Michael showed you those trust documents, did he say anything about financial planning, loans, investments, anything like that? Well, actually, yes, Robert said. He said he was helping you manage your finances, that you'd asked him to look into investment opportunities or debt consolidation options. Made it sound like you wanted to restructure some assets and wanted family advice. Did he specifically mention borrowing money or taking out loans? I asked. He said something about you possibly taking a loan against the trust fund for tax purposes. Said wealthy people do that instead of cashing out assets. It sounded very sophisticated. Connor's eyes widened. He's been telling people I was planning to borrow money, I said flatly. Then, more firmly, Robert, if Michael ever asked you to co-sign something or provide a reference for any financial arrangement, you'd remember that, right? Of course I would. Why? What's going on? Just checking. Robert, I want you to do something right now. Call your bank. Make sure no one has tried to access your accounts or asked questions about your relationship to me. Aunt Dorothy, you're scaring me. Good, I said sharply. You should be scared. And listen, if anyone contacts you claiming to represent me or asking questions about my finances, call me immediately. Don't give them anything, no matter how official they sound. After I hung up, Connor and I sat quietly in my small living room, surrounded by the modest evidence of my real life. The weight of what we'd uncovered pressed down on both of us. Grandma, Connor said softly, what if this is bigger than we think? What if Dad's been using your name and those fake documents to borrow serious money? Then your father isn't just facing fraud charges, sweetheart, I said grimly. He's looking at identity theft, wire fraud, and a laundry list of federal crimes. What do we do? I looked at this good, honest boy dragged into his father's mess through no fault of his own and made a decision. That would change everything. We're going to find out exactly what your father has done, I told Connor firmly. And then we're going to make sure he faces the consequences. But before that, I needed to know who else had heard about Dorothy Hartwell's imaginary millions. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called in a favor. Detective Maria Santos owed me one. 20 years ago, she'd been a rookie cop who'd rushed her diabetic daughter into the ER where I worked. The little girl was in crisis and Maria was terrified. I'd stayed with them the whole night, holding that child's hand until she was stable. We'd kept in touch over the years. Her daughter grew up healthy and Maria climbed the ranks. Now she was known as a detective who didn't let anything slide. Dorothy Hartwell, she said warmly when she answered my call. How are you? It's been too long. I'm well, Maria, I said. But I need your help, and it's something that might interest you professionally. What's going on? Identity theft, fraud, possibly more. Can we meet? 2 hours later, Maria was sitting in my living room with Connor and me, listening to the entire story. She had a legal pad on her lap, jotting notes with the calm, sharp focus of someone who could tell when a case was real. Show me everything, she said. Connor opened his laptop and pulled up everything, the fake bank statements, the photos from the restaurant, all of it. Maria studied each page carefully, pausing every so often to ask a question about a date or a name. When she finally set the papers down, her expression was grim. Dorothy, this is sophisticated, she said. These aren't amateur forgeries. Whoever did this has serious technical skills. And if your son is meeting with Richard Waverly, then he's in much deeper than just college aid fraud. How much deeper? I asked. Let me make some calls, she said. But first, I need you to do something for me. Call your bank and get copies of every statement from the past 3 years. If someone's been using your identity for financial fraud, there could be traces in your real accounts. While I was on the phone with Westchester Community Bank, Connor kept digging into Hartford estate management. When I hung up, his face was pale. Grandma, look at this, he said. Hartford estate management has been in the news. They're under investigation for helping clients create fake documents for tax evasion and loan fraud. Maria's head shot up. When was that investigation announced? 6 months ago, Connor said. The FBI raided their offices in January. Maria leaned back, thinking fast. That explains the timing. If your father was working with them and they got raided, he'd suddenly be exposed. That's probably why he's running to Waverly for damage control. Just then, my phone rang. It was Michael. Mom, we need to talk. Can you come over? Actually, Michael, I said, my voice steady. Why don't you come here? I have some questions for you. I'd rather discuss this privately, he said. Privacy's overrated. Son, come here or we don't talk at all. He showed up 30 minutes later looking like he hadn't slept in days. The moment he saw Connor sitting beside Maria and me, his face went white. Connor, what are you doing here? And who is this? This is Detective Santos, I said calmly. She's helping us understand the legal implications of identity theft and fraud. Michael froze in the doorway. Mom, there's been a misunderstanding. Sit down, Michael, I said. It's time for the truth. He didn't move. Connor, I think you should leave, he said. This is between your grandmother and me, actually, Maria said, standing tall. Connor is a witness in a potential federal crime. He's not going anywhere. That broke him. Michael sank into my armchair like a deflated balloon. How much trouble am I in? He asked quietly. That depends, Maria said, her voice even. On how much you tell us right now. Michael looked at each of us, then buried his face in his hands. It started small, he said. Just the college financial aid thing 2 years ago. But then Robert started talking about how impressed he was that Mom was helping us. And other people started asking questions. I couldn't just admit I'd lied. So you made the lie bigger, I said flatly. He nodded miserably. 6 months ago, Hartford Estate Management approached me. They said they could help make the documents more professional, make everything look legitimate. They said wealthy families did this sort of thing all the time for privacy, Michael muttered. His voice small and hollow. Maria leaned forward. What did you pay them for these services? Michael hesitated. $50,000. Connor's head snapped up. Dad, where did you get $50,000? Michael didn't answer. He didn't have to. You borrowed it, I said quietly. You used the fake trust fund documents as collateral. He nodded miserably. I took out a home equity line of credit first just for $30. Zero to pay Hartford for the initial documentation. Then they said that once the enhanced documents were in place, I could easily get a larger loan to pay off the home equity line and have money left over. Maria's eyes narrowed. How much larger? $500,000, he whispered. The room went completely still. $500,000. I said slowly. In fraudulent loans, using my identity and fake documents. Maria's tone turned sharp. Michael, did you actually receive this money? $200,000 so far, he admitted. The rest was supposed to come through this week, but then Hartford got raided. And everything fell apart. Maria's pen paused midair. Where's the $200,000 now? Most of it went to pay off our credit cards and the home equity loan. Some went toward Connor's tuition, the part that wasn't covered by financial aid. The rest, he trailed off. The rest what? I pressed. I invested it. Connor looked horrified. You invested stolen money? It wasn't stolen, Michael insisted weakly. I was going to pay it back as soon as Mom's trust fund was properly established. I stared at him. My voice barely a whisper. Michael, there is no trust fund. There never was going to be a trust fund. How exactly were you planning to repay money you borrowed against assets I don't even have? He looked up at me, eyes red and desperate. I thought maybe you'd agree to help. Maybe co-sign for real loans once you understood how much good the money was doing for the family. Maria stood abruptly. Her tone was cold and precise. Mr. Hartwell, you've committed identity theft, wire fraud, bank fraud, and potentially money laundering. You're looking at decades in federal prison. I never meant for anyone to get hurt. Michael whispered, trembling. Maria crossed her arms. Your mother's credit has been destroyed by fake accounts opened in her name. Your son committed federal fraud on his financial aid forms. Your entire extended family has been manipulated into believing lies about your wealth. How exactly is that not hurting people? That's when Michael broke. Not quiet, remorseful tears. This was the raw, gasping sob of a man whose whole world had collapsed. Connor, I said softly, would you mind making some tea? I think we could all use some. As Connor went to the kitchen, I moved closer to my son, Michael. I said gently but firmly, here's what's going to happen. You're going to work with Detective Santos and make a full confession. You're going to help the authorities recover every cent that can be recovered. And then you're going to face the consequences of your choices. Mom, please. But here's what else is going to happen, I continued. Connor is going to finish college honestly, this time with real financial aid, based on accurate information. And when you get out of prison, whenever that may be, you're going to rebuild your relationship with him on truth, not lies. Michael's voice cracked. What about Patricia? What about our house? Patricia made her choices when she helped you create those fake documents, I said. As for the house, I looked around my small but honest apartment. I've learned something important this week, Michael. Home isn't about how much money you have or how impressive your address is. It's about living with integrity and being surrounded by people who love you for who you really are. Connor returned with a tray of tea, setting it carefully on the table. As Maria began outlining the legal process, I watched my grandson move with quiet grace. This young man who, despite his parents' failures, had held onto his decency, he was going to be fine. Better than fine. Because he'd learned early that lies have consequences, and that truth matters more than appearances. As for Michael, well, he'd have plenty of time to think about the choices that had brought him here, and me. For the first time in years, I felt genuinely wealthy. Not because of money, but because I had something far more valuable, the truth. A grandson who respected me. And the peace of knowing I'd never again let anyone drag me into their lies. Sometimes, the best inheritance you can leave someone isn't money in a trust fund. It's integrity. Sometimes, it just takes the courage to live honestly, no matter the cost. 3 months later, I got a letter from Connor at Princeton. He'd managed to secure legitimate financial aid after reporting the fraud. And he was thriving in his studies. He'd even started a support group for students dealing with family financial crimes. Apparently, he wasn't the only one whose parents had made poor choices. The letter ended with something that made me smile. Grandma, I finally understand what real wealth looks like. It looks like you, strong, honest, and never backing down from the truth. Thanks for showing me that integrity is the only inheritance that actually matters. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in the box where I kept my most precious possessions. Next to it was a photo Connor had sent him in his dorm room, studying hard and looking genuinely happy outside my small apartment window. The leaves were changing colors. Another season, another chance to start fresh. And for the first time in decades, I was actually looking forward to what came next. If you're watching this, remember, sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to live someone else's lie. And sometimes the greatest wealth is realizing that you're worth more than you ever imagined. Even without a penny to your name, subscribe if this story spoke to you. And let me know in the comments, have you ever discovered a family member lying about money? How did you handle it? Because trust me, the truth always comes out eventually. And when it does, you'll want to be standing on the right side of it. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your own story in the comments. Your voice matters.